Hi Freelancer, welcome back to the Freelance Blueprint. I'm your host Lizzie, a freelance UX designer and digital nomad, and today we're going to talk about how much can you charge your clients. I think all of us struggle with that, and it's very hard to find that sweet spot of, damn it, I could have asked for more, or I probably didn't get that gig because I charged too much. So when you charge on a retainer in project-based setting, it's a little bit tricky to define how much you should charge because the value can change a lot based on the project or on the service that you offer in general. If you have a simple, straightforward offer, like you only offer one landing page, I recommend a fixed project fee, and that's very scalable. If you're offering something more bespoke, like I do, for example, I have different clients with different needs and different demands. So one client might be someone where they want me to design an AI tool that banks can use to analyze their systems. And then I also have clients that are more B2C and a bit more easy to use, like a mobile app where they just want to find nearby coffee shops or something like that. So sitting down to figure out a bespoke project rate takes a lot of time because I have to think, okay, how much time am I going to spend on this? How much effort is it going to take me to create all of these things, to actually want to do this project? Is it too boring for me? Like, for example, for me, doing an app can be, depending on the app, quite boring. Like, I came to a stage where if I think the project is a little bit boring, I usually charge a lot so that if I do end up getting this project, it's worth my time, if that makes sense. But if it's a project that I'm quite keen on working on or where I really agree with the mission and what they're trying to achieve, then I also try and maybe have a bit of a lower rate so I'm more competitive or like that they're more likely to choose me. But I don't want to be the person that they choose just because I'm the cheapest one. So you also want to position yourself in a way where you can show them you're offering quality. But personally, if it comes to these different projects, I quite like charging on a day rate, especially when it's unclear how long this project will last. Sometimes it's an app client where, okay, we could have these screens to redesign, or we just want an audit. I can do an audit quite easily in my own time from a coffee shop. So I don't really care how much time I'm spending on this, or I can just limit myself to a maximum of time if it turns out that this app has tons of subpages. Yeah, so it depends on you, how you like to charge. And again, personally, I like to do it on a day rate basis on some of my UX projects, but it doesn't mean that that's how you have to charge for your projects. For the purpose of this podcast episode, let's look into the hourly and daily rate to define how you can set your pricing the best way there. So let me tell you a little story. When I started freelancing, I was blown away. Like my last permanent job before starting freelancing, I earned around £37,000 a year, which, I mean, that's over 5 years ago now. It's not a bad rate for London, but still for like the UK, it's not that much. And then on my first freelance gig, they offered me £350 a day. And I really had to sit down and think like, did they look at my CV? Do they know what I do? Like, this seems like a lot. So it meant that if I only worked full-time for 1 week, I was making almost double of what I made as an employee working full-time for 1 month as a head of design in a London startup. So I can just work for 1 week and make the same amount of money I did in a month, and how did I set my rate back then? I was quite lucky because I just applied for a couple of freelance gigs online and I found this one and it said that their rate is going to be 350. So that rate was set in the job description. Looking back, I probably should have asked for a little bit more, maybe 360, 370, but it was also the first time I was stepping into freelancing. So I was scared and I just wanted to get some kind of freelance role, and being lucky enough that that was my first gig. So I just said yes to what they offered because it was such a massive jump to what I earned at the time anyway. But also, this is a side note, just because a project says this is their budget, budgets are always flexible because it's not, yes, of course, like certain businesses have a constraint with their budget, but if you can offer them more value, if you can promise them that you'll get this project delivered before the deadline, or maybe you can add on another service, then you can quite negotiate their budget. But again, it's probably something for a different podcast episode. If you're not that lucky that your potential client is transparent with the budget, you need to know what your minimum number is to charge. So what do I mean by that? Basically, if you try to make it a bit more understandable, if you think of a hotel, no matter if your rooms are booked or not, you have certain costs. You will have to pay electricity, you will have to pay your manager, your staff, all these kind of things, no matter if you have guests in the house or not. So it's the same for yourself. You have your subscriptions. If you're a UX designer, you'll have a Figma subscription to pay. If you're a marketeer, you might have like different software tools, and it depends on the services you offer. You also have to make sure that your laptop is working. Like there are certain things that you spend money on, your Wi-Fi, your electricity bill, all of these kind of things. So you need to know how much it is that you need to cover to sustain your business. Some freelancers, they simply go to other freelancers in the same field and ask them how much they charge. And please do that. Please do, because sometimes I meet other UX designers who are like, what, you charge how much for a project? And I'm like, yeah, and the client still thinks it's cheap. So sometimes you actually lose out on a project because you might be too cheap. Please talk to other freelancers in the same niche, in the same industry, because you don't know how much you might be missing out on if you don't know what other people are charging and how you can market yourself. And also, don't be scared of talking with other people about what you're earning. I think it's such a weird mindset that sometimes people feel like, oh, I don't want to say, because maybe they feel like I'm bragging. I was in that situation a lot. But now I'm thinking, I wish more people would talk about it, because if I tell you I'm making £500 a day, you can be like, what, that's possible? Like, yes, it is possible. I had one client where they even offered me to stay. I mean, that was an outside IR35 issue. And if you're not in the UK, I'm not going to bore you with that compliance stuff. But they offered me like £300 more per day if I would stay on the project, you know? So clients have budget. They do. So don't gatekeep. Don't gatekeep other, like, there's enough space for everyone. Don't see other freelancers as your competition. You can all help each other out. Even if someone is your direct competitor, they can't take on all the projects in the world. So if they're fully booked, they can suggest you to that potential lead, you know? So just network with people and find out how much they charge, and also be open about your own rates with other people. So help one another, because that's the thing when you're your own boss and you're on like a one-man, one-woman show, you don't have colleagues, or you don't have like a team in that sense, or the team changes based on project. So if you have your community of fellow freelancers, you can create your team with your people. So help each other. You never know where it's going to lead you to. There is no harm in telling people what you charge. And research is great, but you don't know how they work, or how their clients work, or how they work with their clients. So you need to find a way that covers your needs. So if you charge too low, you end up like I did when I started. I worked too many hours and I ended up feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. And if you're new to freelancing, or even if you've been in the industry for several years, I'm sure you've had moments where you felt the same, where you're just like so overwhelmed with all the work. And if you would have just charged a little bit more, maybe you would have had less work, but then you would have earned the same amount of money and would have had less stress. How can we make this easier? So what if I told you that setting your rates isn't just about the money you make, but also how you design your work life? What I mean by that is, how many hours do you actually want to spend working? Do you want to work 9 to 5, or do you want to be more flexible? How many days do you want to work? Or how many times a year do you want to go on holiday, and how long for? What are your main living expenses, so you can cover those? And how much money do you want to set aside to have a nice retirement in the future? So all of those things you need to consider when you price your own projects, or when you set your hourly rate. The answers to those questions will be very different for everyone. So when I started freelancing, I was very happy to work 40-hour weeks. I also I didn't really work 40-hour weeks. I said yes to every single project that came to me, and I basically ended up working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours, which I hope that you don't have to go through that. So now I'm actually trying to reduce my hours, and I want to make sure that I have enough money to cover my bills, and that I have enough money to put things aside for the future, and also to put some savings in case that there's another dry phase in my business. Okay, I still haven't answered your question of how much you charge. And again, it's going to be very different for every single one. So to figure out how much you should charge, you really need to know how much you actually need to sustain yourself. So it will be different for everyone. And I designed this simple spreadsheet so you can enter your numbers and it will tell you how much you should charge per hour or per day. So if you want to use the spreadsheet, just have a look at the description of this podcast and follow the link to get the spreadsheet. So let me share some numbers with you. If you don't want to work a full-time week, but let's say 30 hours per week on client projects, because let's be honest, we need time for admin. Also, we want to train ourselves on new skills, and also there's a life to live. So if you want to work less, of course, you have to charge more. Then you need to figure out how many days you want and how many days you want to go on holiday. Personally, I don't feel like I need a holiday as much as I did when I was working full-time as an employee, because I have so many breaks and so much holiday time throughout my week. But I do like to take 1 or 2 weeks off here and there. And I also like to do them a bit more spontaneous. But overall, in the year, maybe like 6 weeks of holiday. So define those things for yourself. The nice thing being a freelancer is you can define those things. You don't have a boss who tells you have to go to the office 40 hours a week. You don't have those things. You can decide that for yourself, and you can just communicate that with your client. If they're looking for someone full-time, maybe you're open to working a couple of months full-time on this project, but then maybe after that you just take on smaller gigs. So you can decide that for yourself, and just because you decided that in winter you work this much doesn't mean that you have to do it that way forever. It's your business. You can do whatever you want with it. And then, of course, you need to figure out all the expenses you have, everything that you need to run your business. So if you go back to the hotel example, do you own the hotel? Do you have to pay rent? Or do you pay off a mortgage? So what's your fixed cost to run this hotel? Is there going to be a lot of AC? Maybe there's some electricity that's fixed that you always have to pay, like the light for the reception and the Wi-Fi. But then maybe there is something that goes up when you have more guests, like for example, heating or air conditioning. So all of these things also apply to your freelance business. Do you need, the Wi-Fi cost is always the same, no matter if you have a client or not, but maybe you need extra assets that you're going to download, or anything else that will increase your expenses while you're working on a project compared to when you're not. So all of these things influence how much you should charge per the hour. Maybe also you have some client visits and you might have to buy a train ticket to meet the client in the office, but also on a different note, you don't always have to go to the office, but we'll talk about that at another time. And also maybe you hire subcontractors. So all of these things count as expense and you'll have to pay for it. So it's like any other business. And one thing that I really, really want you to take away from today is taxes. I know it's not the most exciting topic, but so many people that I met, especially at the beginning of the freelance career, they forget about taxes. They just take whatever comes into the bank account and they do with it whatever they want. And then after a year or so of freelancing, they get a receipt of for this tax year, you owe us X amount of money, and they just don't have that money. So they try to find a last minute project, and that project is just there to pay off this tax bill. And then also if you pay late, you have to pay extra fees. So don't forget to calculate your taxes into your costs, and don't forget to put those taxes aside before you take out money from your company. But that's another thing that's about finances. We're going to talk about this in another episode. Okay, back to the spreadsheet. What does this mean in practice? Let's say you want to make £5,000 a month after tax. So we'll have to add the 20% buffer for taxes, and then also all the expenses. And this will vary on the project. When you work online, those are usually not that high. So I put it at 10% because I assume if you're listening to this, you're probably a freelancer working with the opportunity to work remotely. So you won't have that high costs to sustain your business. All you need is your laptop and your internet. But maybe it's another financial topic, but if you're paying Wi-Fi, if you have an electricity bill, you can put this to your expenses. So in reality, if we add the 20% for the taxes for the buffer and the 10% for all the other expenses, to make £5,000 a month, you will have to charge £6,600 a month. So now we divide that by 4.2 because that's on average how many weeks each month has, and by the amount of days you want to work. So if you want to work 3 days or 5 days a week. So let's say you work full-time this month, you'd need to charge £315 a day. or to find out the hourly rate divided by 7, which would be 45 per hour. And the reason I divide it by 7, not by an 8-hour workday, is because the context switching in between projects, then also you'll have breaks. And also personally, I don't like to charge per the hour, because most of the times to really give a project good focus and what it needs and deserves, you need to like really dig into it, and then once you're in it, and you can really concentrate on it. So like I like to dedicate one day to one project. When it comes to my client work, if it comes to my personal stuff, like managing this podcast, managing social media, etc., then I go back and forth between different things. But when I work for a client, I do like to have a chunk that's just for them, and I think it's also better for the client. It's better for my context switch. Like this is like the gear switching is where you spend a lot of energy, and you'll notice that if you work on several different projects. But it's up to you. Either way, your hourly rate shouldn't be exactly your day rate divided by 5. It should always be a little bit more, because you have a lot of admin around the different projects. So just make your hourly rate a little bit higher than your day rate divided by 8. So again, if you want, you can download the spreadsheet, and if you're watching the video version of this on Spotify or YouTube, you can see the spreadsheet that I'm using. But if you're just listening, head to the description to get access to the spreadsheet, and then you can adjust the numbers so it can fit for your own needs. So this spreadsheet specifically is on a monthly basis. It doesn't calculate your holidays or like the time off where you wouldn't earn money when you're on holiday. So if you want to make that £5,000 after tax, even though you're going on holiday this year, then add the buffer, change the buffer to 30%, for example, or reduce the weeks instead of 4.2 weeks a month to like 4 weeks a month, etc. So adjust the spreadsheet so it works for you. And this spreadsheet is showing you your base rate. So if you talk to a potential client and they want to renegotiate your rate, you need to know what the minimum is you need to charge to achieve your freelance goals. So if your goal is those £5,000 a month, then this is the bare minimum that you need to charge. So tell the client a higher day rate, and if they want to negotiate with you, know that you should not go below that number that you've defined for yourself. But of course, if it's your dream client or a project that will open so many doors for you, it might be worth doing something on a lower rate. So for example, one of my first clients, they asked me to lower my rate. So I already had projects where I was working on £350 a day, but he asked me if I could do like 200, 250, because he's also starting out, and in the future he will give me more business, etc., etc. And I said yes to it, because also I didn't have other projects at the time. But through this one connection alone, I got 5 more projects. So having worked with him at a lower rate allowed me to scale and renegotiate my rate with other new clients. And now he has also progressed with his business, and now he's paying me my full rate. No questions asked. But of course, if it's your dream client or a project that will open a lot of doors for you, it might be worth doing it on a lower rate. I'm not someone who likes to do that, but at the same time, you have to weigh down, okay, what do I get for it versus what am I investing? Like, you're still getting paid for it. It might not cover all of it, or it might not allow you to reach your 5K month or whatever the target is that you set for yourself, but also it might open more doors. So always define for yourself, is it worth it to tweak your rate a little bit to get a few doors opening for you? But we only just talked about how to define the rate that you need to charge to maintain yourself. You can always charge more. The question is if you'll find clients that will pay you more. And that depends on the value the clients perceive in you, but also how the client gets to you. If it's someone who just finds your website, they might think, oh, maybe that's a little bit much. But if it's someone where, like, for example, as I mentioned before, that one client who I charged a lower rate for, if he then highly recommends me to his other friend who then wants to really work with me because of what he's seen I've done for the other friend, then you can charge a little bit more, because they're already there to work with you. They're not trying to figure out if you're the right freelancer for them. They're sure that they want to work with you. So in that case, you have a little bit more leverage. So you can also use this as your advantage. And another way to test your pricing, to see if you're charging too much or too low, is when you see how they react when you tell them your rate. So if you have a bunch of calls with leads to discuss the projects, and they don't even flinch an eye when you tell them your rate, you're not charging enough. Go higher with the next client. If too many turn you down because of the rate, or when you tell the rate and you can say from their face like, oof, I didn't expect that, then you might be charging too much. So keep track of that. Keep a list of these are the calls that you have with leads, and then if these leads converted into a client or not. And the rate might not be the reason why they hire you or don't hire you, but it will definitely influence the decision. So if you can tell that everyone says yes after they've hopped on a call with you, you're probably not charging enough. If you have a lot of people, let's say 80% of them saying no, then maybe you ask too much. If you have like a 50-50 split, you're on the sweet spot. Then you charge probably the right amount, because you get the type of clients that really want to work with you, that value your time and your expertise, and you also take off the clients that don't have enough money to work with you. So just keep track of that. The difference between good freelancers and great freelancers is that the great ones know what they're good at and what they're not good at. And to know what you're good at and where you need to improve is you need to know your numbers. You need your objectively know how you're doing in your business and what the ratio is from the leads to converted clients. And you'll only know that when you track it. So next time, like if you haven't done it in the past, don't worry. Like I also don't track every single sales call I have, because sometimes I get a feeling of like, yeah, this is going to happen or this is not going to happen. But next time, I highly recommend when you have calls, just have a simple spreadsheet. Write down if this person converted from just a lead into an actual client. And also maybe you can jot down how they reacted when you told them your rates. So this will help you figure out what to do better next time. So yeah, keep track of what the rates are that you tell your clients. Keep track of how much you charge each of the clients, because also I met this girl recently who was charging one client £25 an hour, whereas another client £40 an hour. And instead of increasing her rates with the previous one, she was just trying to find more clients at £40. And I mean, I think that she's undercharging for her services, both of them. But anyway, also make sure that if you charge a client just because you've been working together for a long time, a lower rate, that you increase those rates over time. Especially if you have like almost a 50% difference between what other people are charging you to what that first client is charging you. So make sure that you put that on the same level, that you bring the ones that you had at the beginning of your career up to also pay you a certain amount. And also the longer they work with you, the more benefit it is for them, because they don't have to onboard someone new. They don't have to give access to the files to someone new, all these kind of things. So you're actually saving them a lot of money by them not having to invest their time into finding an alternative for you. That's it for today's episode. I hope you found it useful and feel more comfortable with your rates. And if you have any questions, comment them below. Or if there are any freelance topics that you want me to cover, let me know in the comments as well. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's at Elisabeth Mayr, Elisabeth with an S, Mayr. And yeah, that's all from me. And I can't wait to have you join again next week. Bye.